Lisa Grant stood in the center of the massive chamber aboard Kepler station and felt very small. The walls stretched high above her head, covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. Representatives from dozens of alien worlds sat in curved rows that formed a perfect circle around the speaking platform, where she now waited. The Zenthari delegate rose first. His tall frame moved with mechanical precision as he approached the center. Each step made the same sound against the metal floor. His 4 eyes never blinked as he studied the human woman before him. Behind Lisa hurried, Jake Morrison shifted nervously. He had never seen so many different alien species in one place. The Velans, with their large heads and silver skin, sat perfectly still like living statues. The Helix representatives moved together as one, their thoughts connected across space and time. Ambassador Grant had prepared for this moment for months. Earth had been invited to join the Galactic Council, but now she sensed something was wrong. The formal invitation had seemed too easy, too quick. Other species had waited centuries for membership. The Zenthari delegate began to speak. His voice came through the translation device as cold and emotionless. As his appearance, the chamber fell silent. As every being focused on his words, he told them about patterns. Across the galaxy, every intelligent species followed the same path of development. First came basic survival, then tool use, then technology. After that came logic and order, followed by perfect cooperation with their own kind. Finally, they achieved harmony with the greater galactic community. The delegate pulled up holographic displays, showing graphs and charts. Each line followed nearly identical curves. The Zenthari had developed this way. The Velans had followed the same pattern. Even the ancient Helix Collective had grown according to these universal rules. Then he showed them the human data. The line representing humanity looked nothing like the others. It jumped up and down seemingly at random. Where other species showed steady progress toward order, humans displayed what the Zenthari called destructive chaos. Where aliens developed collective thinking, humans maintained individual differences. Lisa felt her heart sink as she realized why they had been brought here. This was not an invitation to join anything. This was a trial. The Zenthari delegate continued his presentation. He showed examples of human behavior that made no sense to galactic standards. Humans would risk their lives to save strangers. They would fight wars over ideas rather than resources. They created art that served no practical purpose and told stories about things that never happened. Dar Alex Carter watched the proceedings from his laboratory aboard the research vessel New Horizon 3, light-years away from Kepler station. He was studying the same data the Zenthari presented, but reaching very different conclusions. Alex had spent 2 years cataloging the behavior patterns of galactic species. His assignment was simple: document how humans compared to established galactic norms. What he found challenged everything the scientific community believed about evolution and intelligence. The Zenthari saw chaos. Alex saw something else. Human unpredictability was not random. It followed patterns, but patterns unlike anything else in the galaxy. Humans adapted to change faster than any other known species. They solved problems by breaking rules that other aliens never questioned. On his screens, Alex pulled up video footage from human colonies across space. He watched colonists on Haven World jury-rig equipment in ways that violated every safety protocol, yet somehow worked. He saw human traders negotiate deals that made no logical sense, but created long-term benefits that logic could not predict. The data showed something remarkable. While other species optimized their behavior for specific environments, humans optimized for change itself. They prepared for problems they had never encountered. They created backup plans for situations that might never occur back. In the council chamber, the Valan representative took the floor. His silver skin reflected the chamber lights. As he added his voice to the growing case against humanity, the Velans prized logic above all else, and human behavior violated every principle of logical thinking. He presented case studies of human military tactics that won battles despite being mathematically impossible. Human commanders would divide their forces. When unity was stronger, they would attack when defense was safer. They would negotiate when violence was more efficient. The Valan could not understand how such tactics worked. The humans should have lost every conflict they entered, yet somehow they continued to survive and even thrive in situations that would destroy other species. The Helix representative spoke last, but their words carried the weight of 1,000,000 connected minds. They had analyzed human psychology and found it fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. Humans maintained individual consciousness, even within groups. They disagreed with their own leaders. They changed their minds without external pressure. The Helix declared that human independence of thought created instability. Any civilization that allowed such chaos would eventually destroy itself. The evidence was clear from their perspective. Humans were a failed evolutionary experiment that had somehow avoided extinction through pure chance. Lisa Grant finally received permission to speak. She walked to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of billions of human lives resting on her shoulders. The aliens expected her to defend humanity, but how could she argue against their data? She began by acknowledging that humans were different. She admitted that human behavior often seemed chaotic when viewed from the outside, but she asked the council to consider a different possibility. What if human chaos was not a flaw, but a feature? Jake Morrison watched his superior with growing admiration. Lisa had prepared for this moment, but not with charts and graphs. Instead, she spoke from the heart about what made humanity special. She talked about human creativity and the willingness to try new things even when the outcome was uncertain. She reminded the council that the galaxy was not a stable place. New threats appeared regularly, environments changed, technology advanced in unexpected directions. The species that survived were not always the most logical or the most orderly. They were the ones that could adapt when everything they knew stopped working. The chamber remained silent as Lisa finished her speech. The alien representatives showed no emotion as they considered her words. The Zenthari delegate announced that the council would deliberate and reach a decision within one galactic standard day. As the session ended, Lisa felt both hope and fear. She had done her best to defend humanity, but the alien logic was compelling. From their perspective, humans truly did seem like a dangerous anomaly that threatened everything they had built. Dar Carter continued his research as news of the trial reached him. He worked through the night, analyzing data and running simulations. What he discovered would change everything, but he needed more time to prove his theories. The fate of humanity would be decided before his research was complete. The council chamber emptied slowly, leaving only the soft glow of alien symbols on the walls. The future of human civilization hung in the balance, decided by beings who had never walked on Earth or felt the sun on their faces. They would judge humanity by standards that no human had ever been asked to meet outside the station. Earth continued to spin, unaware that its children stood trial in the court of galactic opinion. The planet that had given birth to chaos and creativity and the stubborn refusal to accept impossible odds waited for a verdict that would determine whether humanity had a place among the stars or would remain forever isolated in their small corner of space. Dr. Nina Rodriguez stared at the data streams flowing across her laboratory screens. The Galactic Council had given humanity one chance to prove their worth. They wanted a complete analysis of human behavioral patterns delivered within 30 standard days. Nina and her team had been working without rest for 2 weeks, and what they found defied every expectation. The research station orbiting Mars buzzed with activity. Human scientists worked alongside the few alien observers who had volunteered to study the project. Nina had divided her team into groups, each focusing on different aspects of human psychology. They studied everything from individual decision making to large-scale social movements. At first, the data seemed to support the alien claims. Human behavior was chaotic, unpredictable, and often contradictory. Humans would sacrifice personal gain for abstract principles. They would risk everything on ideas that had never been tested. They would disagree with experts and follow leaders who promised impossible things. But Nina began to notice something the aliens had missed. The chaos had patterns not in the individual choices, but in the outcomes. Over time, human unpredictability led to remarkable stability, not the kind of stability the aliens knew, but Something different, something stronger. Meanwhile, on the frontier world of Haven, colony leader Tom Brady faced the kind of crisis that would test every theory about human nature. A massive solar flare was racing toward their world. The protective shields designed by Valen engineers were failing, and evacuation was impossible. The logical solution was clear. Shut down all non-essential systems, redirect power to the shields, and hope they would hold long enough for rescue. Ships to arrive. The alien technical advisors calculated a 12% chance of survival if the colonists followed this plantum. Brady looked at the numbers and made a decision that violated every safety protocol in the Galactic Handbook. Instead of conserving power, he ordered his engineers to overload the shield generators, using every scrap of energy the colony could produce, including power meant for life support systems. Engineer Mike Chen protested that the plan would destroy the shields entirely if it failed. The overload had a 73% chance of causing catastrophic failure. Tom acknowledged the risk, but pointed out something the alien calculations had missed. If they followed the safe plan, they would die slowly. If they tried his plan, they would either live or die quickly, but at least they would have tried. Captain Kelly Foster coordinated the evacuation of non-essential personnel to the deepest underground shelters, while the engineers worked frantically to modify systems that had never been designed for such abuse. Every human on Haven knew they were attempting something that should not work. The solar flare struck 6 hours ahead of schedule. The modified shields held for exactly 17 minutes, longer than the original design specifications. Those 17 minutes were enough. The flare passed, and 50,000 humans survived. What should have been certain death news of the Haven incident reached Dr. Rodriguez as she was analyzing the latest behavioral data. The timing was perfect, because it provided a real-world example of the pattern she was beginning to understand. Human chaos was not random, it was adaptive. Nina called her team together to share her findings. She explained that while other species evolved to optimize for specific environments, humans had evolved to optimize for change itself. They were biological chaos engines, designed to find solutions when all known options had failed. The alien observers listened, with growing confusion. One Centauri researcher pointed out that the Haven colony had violated 17 safety protocols and achieved success through pure chance. Nina disagreed. She showed them data from hundreds of similar incidents throughout human history. Humans had always succeeded by trying things that should not work. They had survived ice ages by leaving Africa, when logic said to stay. They had crossed oceans in tiny boats, when wisdom said the journey was impossible. They had reached for the stars when mathematics said the distances were too great. The pattern was always the same. When faced with impossible odds, humans would try impossible solutions. Most of the time they failed, but when they succeeded they achieved things that no logical approach could match, and over time, the successes outweighed the failures. Dr. Alex Carter joined the research from his position aboard the New Horizon. His data supported Nina's conclusions, but added another crucial element. Human success was not based on individual brilliance, but on collective chaos. When humans faced problems, they tried many different solutions simultaneously. Unlike the Helix Collective, which sought consensus before acting, humans encouraged disagreement. They wanted multiple approaches to every problem. They celebrated the rebels and misfits who questioned established wisdom. This created waste and conflict, but it also created redundancy and innovation. The alien observers struggled to understand this concept. Their civilizations had achieved greatness by eliminating waste and conflict. They could not see how chaos could be more efficient than order. Nina tried to explain using examples from human history. She showed them how human scientific progress came from researchers who challenged accepted theories. She demonstrated how human art advanced through individuals who broke traditional rules. She explained how human societies grew stronger by protecting minority opinions and unusual ideas. The Centauri observer interrupted to point out that human societies also suffered from wars and conflicts caused by their inability to reach consensus. Nina agreed, but asked him to consider the alternative. The galactic civilizations had achieved perfect peace by eliminating all sources of disagreement. But what happened when they faced a problem their consensus could not solve? What happened when their perfect logic led them to a dead end? Human societies might fight among themselves, but they never stopped trying new approaches. They never declared any problem impossibles. The 30-day deadline approached. Nina Rodriguez prepared her final report. She had documented something unprecedented in galactic history. Human chaos was not a bug in their evolutionary programming, it was a feature designed for survival. In an unpredictable universe, the Haven colony had provided the perfect example. When conventional wisdom failed, humans would try unconventional solutions. When logic said there was no hope, humans would hope anyway. When experts calculated the odds of failure, humans would ignore the odds and try to succeed. Nina realized that this was why the Galactic Council feared humanity, not because humans were violent or destructive, but because they represented a completely different approach to existence. They challenged the fundamental assumption that order was always better than chaos. Other galactic species had evolved past their chaotic phases. They had learned to think collectively, to plan logically, and to accept limitations gracefully. They had become perfect. But perfection meant they could only succeed within the parameters they understood. Humans had never become perfect. They remained chaotic, unpredictable, and willing to attempt the impossible. This made them dangerous to societies built on the assumption that all problems had logical solutions and all intelligent beings would eventually learn to think the same way. As Nina submitted her report to the Galactic Council, she wondered if her findings would save humanity or doom them. She had proven that human chaos served a purpose, but would the aliens see that purpose as beneficial or threatening? The answer would determine whether humanity joined the galactic community or remained isolated as a quarantined species, too dangerous to interact with civilized society. Nina could only hope that somewhere among the logical, ordered minds of the council there remained enough curiosity to consider that maybe chaos was not always the enemy of order. Maybe sometimes chaos was exactly what the universe needed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 months after Dr. Rodriguez submitted her report on human behavior patterns. But the debate about humanity was suddenly forgotten because something far worse had appeared at the edge of galactic space. The Devourers had returned. For 1,000 years they had been nothing more than scary stories told by the oldest species. Massive machine intelligences that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Most aliens believed they were myths created to explain ancient disasters that had simpler explanations. But the sensor readings were unmistakable. A fleet of massive dark ships had emerged from the void between galaxies. They moved with purpose toward the inhabited systems along the galactic rim. Their technology was beyond anything the current civilizations could match. Colonel Sam Parker stood on the bridge of her flagship watching the tactical displays that showed the scope of the threat. 50 worlds had already gone silent in the past 2 weeks. The alien response had been swift and logical. Evacuate the outer colonies, fortify the core systems, and request emergency council sessions to coordinate defense. Nassam had different ideas. Her human fleet was small compared to the massive alien armadas that were moving into defensive positions around major worlds, but size was not everything. The humans had spent months studying the Devourer attack patterns, and Sam believed she understood something. The aliens had missed the Devourers, were not just destroying worlds randomly, they were following a pattern. They targeted command centers. First, communication networks. Second, in production facilities. Third, they were designed to fight against organized, civilized opponents who would respond with organized, civilized tactics. Lieutenant Amy Cross piloted her fighter through the asteroid field where the human fleet was hiding. She had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of her career, flying reconnaissance against ships that no pilot had ever faced and survived. To describe Amy had grown up on stories of human pilots who had achieved impossible victories against overwhelming odds. She knew those stories were mostly fiction, but she also knew they contained important truths about how humans fought when they had no other choice. Her sensors detected the massive Devourer mothership before her eyes could see it. The thing was larger than most space stations, a dark shape that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She transmitted the tactical data back to Colonel Parker and prepared to make her escape. The Devourer fighters that came after her moved with mechanical precision. They calculated optimal intercept courses and fired with mathematical accuracy, but Amy did not fly with mathematical precision. She twisted and turned in patterns that made no sense, following instincts that no computer could predict. She escaped because the Devourer pilots could not understand why she would choose a clearly inferior flight path. The machines had been designed to fight logical opponents. They could counter every rational strategy, but they struggled against pilots who made irrational choices that somehow worked. Ben Torres received Amy's data and updated his tactical analysis. The Devourers were incredibly powerful, but they had weaknesses. They assumed their opponents would behave predictably. They concentrated their forces to achieve overwhelming superiority. At decisive points, they followed strategies that had worked for millions of years against every enemy they had ever faced. Ben realized that the alien fleets were making the same mistake they had made with humanity. They were trying to fight the Devourers using logic and order against an enemy that had already learned to counter logic and order. The machines had evolved to defeat civilized tactics, but humans were not entirely civilized. Colonel Parker made her decision. She ordered the human fleet to split into dozens of independent groups, each commanded by officers with complete freedom to choose their own tactics. She told them to avoid major battles and instead focus on targets that seemed unimportant, to attack with no apparent pattern and to retreat whenever retreat seemed like the wrong choice. The alien observers who were monitoring human communications declared the strategy insane. The humans were abandoning all coordination. They were giving up their ability to concentrate force. They were throwing away every advantage that organized military doctrine provided. The first human strike group attacked a Devourer supply convoy that was heading toward an unimportant mining world. Engineer Lisa Harper had jury-rigged weapons that violated every principle of safe engineering. Her modifications should have destroyed her own ship, but instead, they punched through Devourer armor that had resisted conventional weapons. The second group, led by Captain Jack Stone, attempted something even more impossible. They boarded a Devourer ship while it was moving at combat speed, using modified cargo shuttles that had never been designed for such missions. The alien experts calculated a survival probability of less than 1%. Jack Stone and his team not only survived, but managed to plant explosive devices in critical systems before escaping. The Devourer ship continued operating for 6 hours before the delayed charges detonated, destroying a vessel that conventional attacks had barely scratched. More human groups followed their example. Each attack was different. Each group tried tactics that no military academy would teach. The humans suffered heavy losses, but they also achieved results that no alien force had managed. The Devourers began to adapt their strategies to counter human unpredictability, but every time they developed countermeasures for one human tactic, the humans switched to completely different approaches. The machines could not predict what humans would do next, because the humans themselves did not know what they would do next. The alien fleets watched in confusion as the seemingly chaotic human attacks began to have systematic effects. Devourer supply lines were disrupted. Their communication networks became unreliable. Their formations lost cohesion as individual ships tried to defend against threats that came from unexpected directions. When the main Devourer mothership finally arrived at the Central Worlds, it faced a very different situation than its programming had anticipated. The alien defenders were still organized in logical formations, but they were supported by human units that refused to follow any logical pattern. The battle for the galactic core began with the largest space engagement in recorded history. Millions of ships clashed in formations that stretched across entire solar systems. The Devourers had numerical superiority, technological advantages and battle experience spanning eons, but they had never fought An enemy that included humans. Captain Jack Stone led the boarding assault that would become legendary in human history. His target was impossible, a ship the size of a small moon, protected by weapons that could destroy planets, but Stone had studied the Devourer designs and found their weaknesses. Machines were designed for external threats. They had powerful shields, massive armor and weapon systems that could engage enemies at extreme range. But their internal defenses assumed that any intruder would be detected and eliminated before reaching critical system. Stone's team used tactics borrowed from ancient human pirates. They hid inside, destroyed ships, drifted through debris fields, and crawled through maintenance shafts that were too small for proper military equipment. They reached the mothership's core and planted charges that would not just destroy the vessel, but send feedback through the Devourer network. The explosion was visible from dozens of star systems. When the mothership died, it took with it the coordination systems that controlled the entire Devourer fleet. The remaining machines continued fighting, but they were no longer part of a unified intelligence. They had become individual ships pursuing individual objectives. The human fleet immediately capitalized on this change. Colonel Parker ordered all groups to focus on isolated targets, using their advantage in chaos to prevent the Devourers from regrouping. The aliens finally understood what the humans had been doing, and began to copy their tactics. The battle ended not with a final decisive engagement, but with the gradual destruction of Devourer forces that could no longer coordinate their strategies. The machines that had conquered countless civilizations were defeated by an enemy that refused to fight the way civilized beings were supposed to fight. As the last Devourer ships fled back toward the void between galaxies, the Galactic Council faced an uncomfortable truth. The organized, logical civilizations had been losing until the chaotic, unpredictable humans had changed the nature of the conflict. The debate about human membership in galactic society was over. The question now was whether the aliens could learn to think like humans before the next impossible threat appeared on the horizon. Dr. Alex Carter walked through the ruins of the ancient library on Zarian Prime, surrounded by technology that was older than most stellar formations. The Galactic Council had authorized this expedition as part of the rebuilding effort after the Devourer War, but Alex suspected there were deeper reasons for studying these abandoned worlds. Captain Rachel King led the archaeological team through chambers that had not been opened for millions of years. Her expertise in xenarchaeology had made her the obvious choice for this mission, but even she was unprepared for what they were discovering in the depths of this dead civilization. The library contained records from dozens of galactic civilizations that had existed long before the current era. Each one had followed the same pattern Alex had documented in his research on contemporary species. They had evolved from chaos to order, from individual thinking to collective harmony, from unpredictable creativity to logical efficiency. Every single one of them had gone extinct. Dr. Paul White carefully translated the ancient texts, using linguistic analysis software that had been upgraded with human pattern recognition algorithms. The stories they revealed challenged everything the current galactic community believed about evolution and progress. The first galactic civilization had achieved perfect logical thinking. They had eliminated war, poverty, and conflict through superior organization and rational planning. Their technology had surpassed anything that existed today. Their society had operated with mathematical precision for over 10,000 years. Then something had changed. Climate patterns shifted in ways their models could not predict. New forms of stellar radiation appeared that their science had never encountered. Hostile life forms evolved that did not follow the biological rules they understood. The perfect civilization had responded with perfect logic. They had analyzed the threats, calculated optimal responses, and implemented solutions based on proven principles. But the universe had not cooperated with their logic. The threats had continued to evolve in unpredictable ways that their rational systems could not counter. Within 500 years, the most advanced civilization in galactic history had collapsed completely. Their perfect organization became a weakness when the environment required rapid adaptation. Their collective thinking prevented the individual innovation that might have found new solutions. Their logical efficiency eliminated the redundancy that could have provided alternatives when their main systems failed. Daleks found records of similar collapses throughout galactic history. Each time a civilization achieved what they considered evolutionary perfection, each time they faced challenges that their perfection could not handle, each time they went extinct because they had eliminated the very chaos that could have saved them, but something else appeared in the records. References to species that did not follow the normal evolutionary pattern, beings that maintained individual thinking even after developing advanced technology, groups that preserved chaotic elements in their otherwise ordered societies, civilizations that deliberately cultivated unpredictability. The ancient texts called them chaos seeds and described them as crucial for galactic survival. Every stable period in galactic history had included at least one chaos species. The record suggested that these groups were not accidents but necessary components of galactic civilization. Captain King discovered physical evidence that supported the historical records. In the deepest chambers of the library, they found genetic samples from dozens of extinct species. The chaos species shared certain characteristics with each other and with modern humans. They maintained high levels of individual variation. They showed resistance to collective thinking patterns. They preserved what the ancients called adaptive randomness. Dr. White found the most disturbing revelation in the final records of the last great galactic civilization. The texts described a deliberate campaign to eliminate chaos species. The logical civilizations had decided that unpredictable groups were dangerous obstacles to galactic harmony. They had systematically destroyed or converted every chaos species they encountered. The campaign had been completely successful. Within 1,000 years, every remaining species in the galaxy had achieved perfect logical thinking, perfect organization, perfect harmony. They had also achieved perfect vulnerability to any threat their logic could not understand. When the next major crisis arrived, there were no chaos species left to provide alternative solutions, no individual thinkers to question the collective wisdom, no unpredictable groups to try impossible strategies. The perfect galactic civilization faced an imperfect universe, and lost. Alex realized that the current galactic community was following exactly the same path the Xanthari, Velans and Helix had all evolved beyond their chaotic phases. They represented the same type of logical perfection that had repeatedly led to extinction, and they had been trying to eliminate or convert humanity, just as their predecessors had eliminated the chaos species of previous eras. Devourer War had provided a demonstration of why this was a fatal mistake. Logical species had responded to the threat with logical strategies that should have worked but did not. The chaotic humans had responded with chaotic strategies that should not have worked but did. When Alex transmitted his findings back to Earth and the Galactic Council, the reaction was immediate and polarized. The alien representatives, who had supported human integration, saw the historical data as proof that chaos species were essential for galactic survival. The representatives who had opposed humanity saw the same data as evidence that chaos species were inherently destructive forces that caused civilizations to collapse. Nina Rodriguez analyzed the new data alongside her existing research on human behavioral patterns. She discovered that the pattern extended beyond individual psychology to entire civilizations. Human societies had always included both order and chaos, logical thinkers and creative rebels, efficient systems and redundant alternatives. This was why human civilizations had survived catastrophes that destroyed other societies. When logical approaches failed, humans had chaotic alternatives ready to try. When efficient systems broke down, humans had redundant systems to fall back on. When collective wisdom proved wrong, humans had individual dissenters ready to offer different perspectives, but the galactic community had no such redundancy. The current species had all evolved past their chaotic phases. They had achieved the kind of perfection that had repeatedly proven to be a dead end. They had no backup systems, no alternative approaches, no chaos seeds to provide different solutions when their logic failed. The revelation created a crisis within the Galactic Council. Some members argued for immediate integration of human chaos protocols into their own societies. Others insisted that chaos was still dangerous, and that the historical collapses had been caused by chaos species, rather than prevented by them. The debate raged for months, while Alex and his team continued their archaeological work. They found evidence of deliberate genetic engineering in some of the extinct chaos species, suggesting that at least some civilizations had understood the importance of maintaining unpredictability. They had created artificial chaos species when natural ones were not available. The implications were staggering. If chaos species were artificially created, rather than naturally evolved, then their role in galactic civilization was not accidental, but designed. Someone, or something, had engineered unpredictability as a survival mechanism for galactic civilization. Captain King made the final discovery that changed everything. In the oldest section of the library, she found records that predated all known galactic civilizations. The texts described visitors from beyond the galaxy who had seeded chaos species throughout local space. Before departing for unknown destinations, the visitors had left a message for any civilization advanced enough to discover their records. The universe was inherently unpredictable, and any species that achieved perfect predictability would eventually face situations they could not handle. The only long-term survival strategy was to maintain some level of chaos. Even when logic suggested that chaos was inefficient, humanity had not evolved as a glitch in galactic civilization. They had evolved as a fail-safe mechanism, designed to preserve galactic civilization when logic alone was not enough. Their chaos was not a bug in their evolutionary programming, it was a feature that had been designed for exactly the kind of crisis they had just survived at. The question now was whether the galactic community could learn to embrace chaos. Before the next crisis arrived, the universe had already demonstrated that it would continue to present challenges that pure logic could not solve. The only question was whether intelligent life would be wise enough to maintain the chaos needed to meet those challenges. Alex Carter stood in the ancient library surrounded by the records of countless extinct civilizations and realized that the fate of the current galactic community depended on their willingness to accept a fundamental truth. Perfection was not the goal of evolution. Survival was, and sometimes survival required, the courage to be imperfect. Lisa Grant stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly as its first Secretary General. The old council chambers had been redesigned to accommodate a very different approach to galactic governance. Instead of perfect circles representing unity and consensus, the new chamber featured irregular patterns that celebrated diversity and disagreement. 1 year had passed since the revelation about chaos species and their role in galactic survival. The transition had not been easy. Many alien civilizations struggled to understand how deliberate unpredictability could be beneficial. Their entire cultures were built on the assumption that order was always superior to chaos, but the evidence was overwhelming. The archaeological discoveries on Zarian Prime had been confirmed by similar findings across dozens of ancient worlds. Every major galactic civilization in recorded history had followed the same pattern: evolution toward perfect order, followed by extinction when perfection met unpredictability. Nina Rodriguez presented her final report on the integration of chaos protocols into galactic society. Her research had expanded beyond human psychology to include practical applications of controlled unpredictability in alien cultures. The results were promising but also challenging. Some species had successfully incorporated human-style decision-making into their governments and military structures. The Xanthari had created special units that were trained to ignore standard protocols when conventional solutions failed. The Velans had established research groups dedicated to pursuing illogical theories that might lead to unexpected breakthroughs. But other species found the transition impossible. Their evolutionary programming was too deeply ingrained to allow for significant changes. The Helix Collective had tried to introduce individual thinking into their group consciousness, but the experiment had caused psychological trauma among their test subjects. Lisa realized that the solution was not to force every species to become more like humans. Instead, the galaxy needed to maintain diversity, including both logical species that provided stability and chaotic species that provided adaptability. The key was balance between order and chaos, not the dominance of either approach. The first test of the new galactic philosophy came sooner than anyone expected. Deep space monitoring stations detected signals from the Andromeda galaxy, indicating the approach of something that made the Devourers look like a minor threat. The signals suggested technology that operated on principles unknown to current Galactic Science. Admiral Kate Morrison received command of the Combined Response Fleet. Her brother Jake had become an expert on human military doctrine and helped design the new integrated command structure that would govern ships from dozens of different species. The old approach would have been to analyze the threat, determine the optimal response, and implement a coordinated strategy based on proven tactics, but the archaeological evidence had shown that such approaches always failed when facing truly unprecedented challenges. Instead, Kate implemented what became known as the Morrison Protocol. Every ship in the fleet was given basic guidelines for cooperation, but individual commanders were encouraged to develop their own tactical approaches. No central authority would dictate specific strategies. Instead, the fleet would respond to threats using hundreds of different methods simultaneously. Commander Steve Adams led the first engagement against the approaching entities. His mixed-species squadron included logical Xanthari ships that followed mathematical targeting algorithms alongside human vessels that relied on pilot intuition. The combination proved more effective than either approach would have been alone. The Xanthari ships provided precise long-range fire that weakened enemy defenses, while human ships exploited gaps in enemy formations using tactics that made no mathematical sense, but somehow worked. The alien entities found themselves fighting an enemy that could not be predicted because the enemy itself did not know what it would do next. But the true test came when the main alien force revealed technology that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Their ships existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously making conventional targeting impossible. Their weapons operated outside normal space-time, making traditional defenses useless. The logical response would have been to retreat and develop countermeasures based on scientific analysis of the new technology. But scientific analysis would have taken years. That the galaxy did not have. The entities were consuming entire star systems as they advanced toward the galactic core. Admiral Morrison made a decision that embodied everything humanity had taught the galaxy about survival. She ordered every ship in the fleet to try whatever they thought might work regardless of whether it made sense. The fleet became a massive experiment in applied chaos. Some ships tried to match the aliens' dimensional shifts using modified engines that should have exploded. Other ships attempted to disrupt alien weapons using electromagnetic fields generated by overloaded power cores. Still others tried to communicate with the entities using mathematical patterns broadcast on impossible frequencies. Most of these attempts failed catastrophically. Ships were destroyed, weapons malfunctioned, and entire squadrons vanished in two-dimensional rifts. But some attempts succeeded in ways that no one could have predicted. Engineer Lisa Harper discovered that alien technology was vulnerable to certain types of quantum interference that could only be generated by deliberately destabilizing human fusion reactors. The technique worked once before the aliens adapted their defenses, but that one success provided crucial data for further experiment. Jack Stone found that the entities could be confused by extremely simple strategies that they apparently had not encountered before. His decision to ram an alien ship using a centuries-old chemical rocket succeeded because the alien defenses were designed to counter advanced technology, not primitive kinetics. Dr. Alex Carter analyzed the ongoing battle from his research station and realized something important. The alien entities were not malevolent invaders, but rather another form of logical civilization that had achieved perfect efficiency in their home galaxy. They had eliminated all chaos from their society. and were now consuming other galaxies because they could no longer adapt to changes in their environment. The revelation changed the nature of the conflict. Instead of trying to destroy the entities, the galactic fleet began trying to communicate with them using the universal language of controlled chaos. Human ships began broadcasting random signals, while alien ships transmitted logical patterns that gradually became more unpredictable. The breakthrough came when Dr. Paul White successfully established communication using a combination of mathematical logic and artistic creativity that confused the entities enough to get their attention. The entities had never encountered a civilization that deliberately combined order and chaos. They had been consuming other galaxies because they assumed all intelligence eventually evolved toward perfect logic. The final resolution came not through military victory but through cultural exchange. The entities agreed to halt their advance in exchange for access to galactic chaos protocols. They wanted to learn how to reintroduce unpredictability into their own civilization before they consumed everything in their path. Lisa Grant presided over the negotiations that established the first intergalactic alliance based on the principle of controlled chaos. The entities would share their advanced technology in exchange for training in adaptive randomness. Both civilizations would benefit from the combination of perfect logic and imperfect creativity. As the crisis ended and the galaxy began to rebuild, Lisa reflected on everything humanity had learned about their role in galactic civilization. They had not been a glitch in evolution but rather evolution answer to the inherent unpredictability of existence. The universe was fundamentally chaotic, and any civilization that tried to eliminate chaos would eventually face situations their order could not handle. The species that survived were not the most logical or the most efficient, but the ones that maintained the ability to try impossible solutions when everything else failed. Humanity had been designed for survival, not through superior strength or intelligence, but through their willingness to embrace chaos when order was not enough. They were the universe backup plan for when perfection met the imperfect reality of existence. The galactic assembly continued to grow as more species learned to balance order and chaos in their societies. Some civilizations proved better at logic, while others excelled at creativity, but all successful societies learned to value both approaches and to maintain the diversity that made adaptation possible. Dr. Nina Rodriguez published her final paper on the role of chaos species in galactic evolution. Her conclusion was simple: intelligence that eliminated all unpredictability would eventually face unpredictable challenges that it could not survive. The universe required diversity, not just in biology, but in thinking itself. Admiral Kate Morrison established the new Galactic Defense Force based on principles that combined human chaos with alien order. Every fleet included ships that followed standard procedures, alongside vessels that were specifically designed to break rules when rules were not enough. The galaxy had learned that survival was not about achieving perfection but about maintaining the ability to be imperfect. When perfection was not enough, humanity had not been a glitch in the galactic system. They had been the system working exactly as designed, ensuring that intelligence could survive in a universe that would always present new and impossible challenges. As Lisa Grant looked out at the stars from her office aboard the Galactic Assembly Station, she knew that humanity had found its place in the galaxy. They were the chaos that kept order from becoming stagnation, the unpredictability that kept logic from becoming a trap, the survivors who ensured that galactic civilization would continue to adapt and thrive no matter what impossible challenges the universe might present. The universe had designed humanity for survival, and humanity had proven that the design worked perfectly.